Are you a leader? My guess is that some of you will immediately answer that by saying, no, not a leader. But think about it this way. Are you a parent? Then you're a leader. Are you a grandparent? Do you have even one or two employees under you at work? Do you have responsibilities in a volunteer organization? Maybe in the community, maybe at church. You're a leader. Just about everyone is a leader in some shape or size. And when we think about leadership, it is such a multi-faceted topic. There is so much written about it. In my office, I have a whole shelf with leadership books. One of the things that is not always talked about when it comes to leadership is this phrase: leadership can be lonely. Maybe you felt that before. When you're leading, you can feel like you're carrying a weight and other people don't understand it. And that's often true. We can feel lonely in our leadership. Well, in this week's devotional, we're going to meet someone who was a leader and was very lonely. Thing is, he didn't really know it, but someone visits him and points it out, and it is just so clear. And the best part about it is there's a solution to loneliness in leadership that we learn through that person's visit. So, where are we at? We've been studying the account of the exodus of the people of Israel out of slavery in Egypt. And now we're in chapter 17, and they're free. God has liberated them. They're en route to their new home, which is the promised land of Canaan. That's the land of their forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And they're free. Their leader is Moses. And God said that he did not want them to take the shortest northern route because of the powerful armies of the Philistines. And so instead, they're taking a sideways route, headed east. And last week, that sideways route took them through the desert, and the people became very grumpy, bitter. They were lacking water and food, and so what did God do? He responded each time with provision, a miraculous provision. Well, now in chapter 17, verses 1 through 7, we read they're grumbling again. It's water again. And this time we have a sense that the grumbling is intensifying. In fact, their leader, Moses, is afraid of the people. He cries out to God, saying, "The people are almost ready to stone me." Talk about loneliness in leadership. The Lord takes it all in stride, and this time he asks Moses to strike his staff against a rock, and water flows out. It's a wonderful miracle of provision again. But Moses is starting to feel the pain of leadership, the loneliness of leadership. And he gives this place a name where that rock was. He calls it Massa and Meribah, and that means testing and quarreling. In fact, the word testing is mentioned multiple times in this passage. In verse 2, Moses accuses the people of putting the Lord to the test. And then in verse 7, we read not only the name Massa, testing, but the narrator tells us that the people also, they tested the Lord by questioning, "Is the Lord among us or not?" So what we see in this is that testing the Lord is an idea that carries a very negative connotation. It's so negative that this episode gets stuck in the imagination of the people for centuries to come. If we go ahead into Psalm 95, verses 8 through 11, God will say, and again, this is hundreds of years later, God will say through the psalmist to the people of Israel, "Do not harden your hearts as you did at Meribah, as you did that day at Massa in the wilderness, where your ancestors tested me. They tried me, though they had seen what I did. For 40 years I was angry with that generation. I said, they are a people whose hearts go astray. They have not known my ways. So I declared on oath in my anger, they shall never enter my rest." Very serious. Now, there is actually another Meribah incident. Same name, different place, kind of the same situation. And that's going to pop up later in the Israelites' wilderness journeys. And so that verse is also talking about that. But here in Exodus 17, while the people are showing signs that they sometimes have hearts that wander away from trusting in God, they haven't yet fully rebelled. God is very gracious here in Exodus 17. He's patient. He's merciful to them. But like I said, Moses is getting frustrated. It's sometimes lonely at the top. But right there, his frustration is left hanging. The narrator of the story records no response to Moses' accusation against the people that they were testing God and how wrong that was. Instead, the narrative continues with a dramatic turn in verse 8. The Israelites are attacked by the Amalekites. Well, Moses somehow instinctively knows what to do in this moment. He turns to someone for help, a man named Joshua. This is the first time we're meeting Joshua, but Joshua is going to become a major figure in the life of the nation. For now, all we know is that Moses turns to Joshua and asks him to lead the Israelite army. And talking here about the men, 600,000 men. But they're not well equipped. They're not trained. This is not a fighting force that has been battle hardened time and time again. They've never fought before. They've been slaves, actually. All they've experienced is being beaten down. How's this going to go? So what we see is that Joshua, now a leader, has a significant task. He has got to lead an untrained, ill-equipped army of former slaves who are now volunteers. But there's something interesting in Joshua's name. It's the same derivative from the name Hosea, Yeshua, Jesus. It's all the same name, and it all means the Lord saves. Well, here in Exodus chapter 17, winning a battle against the Amalekites is going to require God to save his people, and God does something amazing. As long as Moses holds up his staff with his arms in the air, the Israelite army is winning the battle. But when his arms get tired and they droop down, then the Israelite army would start losing the battle. So to make sure that his arms remain aloft, Moses sat on a stone while his brother Aaron and another man named Hur hold up his arms. They are supporting them. And they do this until sunset, when Joshua's army is finally victorious. God had saved his people. The interesting thing is, how did the people respond to this miracle? Did they know that God was at work through Moses raising his arms? Did they see the evidence of the miracle? The winning, then the losing, then the winning, then the losing. Or did the people of Israel think that they did this, that they were such a good fighting force, that they won the battle? The text doesn't tell us how the people respond. But Moses, he definitely has an opinion. In verses 15 and 16, Moses is so thankful that he builds an altar of remembrance. So I'm standing here in front of our church's communion table. Do this in remembrance of me. And he gives the altar a name. The Lord is my banner. Now that word banner there refers to a flag. The idea that a flag is flying over the nation of Israel, and it's the Lord. He is the true protector and savior. Moses wants the people to know it was God who did this, and God is powerful, God is faithful, God has saved them. Now the people, though, we've been watching them. They've been wandering in the desert for a month and a half plus, and they have been complaining. They have had a root of bitterness grow up inside of them. They have not been trusting in God. Even though God rescued them from the Egyptians and then walked them across the parted waters of the Red Sea on dry land, the people have been incredibly shallow in their faith. But now God has miraculously provided water, not one, but 2 times. He's provided daily food for them through manna and quail. he has also now given them military victory over the Amalekites. God has shown himself clearly to be their powerful provider. Moses is not alone in leadership. God is with him. Joshua is with him. But now we move on to chapter 18. And this theme of leadership really comes into focus. We read in Exodus chapter 18, verses 1 through 12, that Moses' father-in-law, his wife, and his 2 sons join Moses and all the people of Israel there in the desert. And Moses tells his father-in-law Jethro all the amazing things that God had done so far in the past month and a half, 2 months. And Jethro is astounded and he worships God. Then the next day we read that Jethro observes Moses' leadership style. Moses is there arbitrating disputes that the people bring to him. And it takes Moses all day long, from morning until late at night. Now consider, there are 600,000 men in the people of Israel. Add to that women and children. What do we have? 1 million, 1.5 million. It's hard to know. It's astounding to think that Moses took on the role of being the judge of all the disputes of that many people. I did a little research because I was just interested. So, in 2021, the city of Philadelphia had 1.56 million people. It's not unreasonable to say that the nation of Israel in Exodus chapter 17, 18 was about that size. But guess how many judges the city of Philadelphia has? The Philly Court of Common Pleas has 439 judges. 439. And Moses is one. Sometimes lonely, being the leader. How in the world could Moses handle a caseload from a population of 1.5 million? His father-in-law Jethro is right to be very, very concerned about Moses. And so Jethro suggests that Moses create a system of delegation, appointing judges underneath Moses for groups of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. And these officials, these sub-judges, will handle most of the matters of the nation. They will only bring before Moses the most difficult, thorny cases. And with this idea, we see Jethro's wisdom. He even suggests that Moses should consider this idea if God so commands, meaning that Jethro is really humble before the Lord. Well, it seems like God did so command this because Moses follows Jethro's advice. They part ways, Jethro returns to his country, and Moses begins to implement the system. Now, we don't know exactly how it all worked out. Did Moses actually use the 1,150 and 10 divisions? I mean, that alone would require a massive amount of people. If the nation were 1.5 million strong, Moses would need to select 1,500 people just to be in charge of the groups of 1,000, let alone the hundreds and the 50s and the 10s. Now, we're in speculative territory here. The text doesn't tell us how this all worked out. So perhaps Moses created a selection system in where the people chose their own leaders. Maybe he used a more simplified delegation system. Like, for example, in Philly, they have 459 judges, and they're each responsible for about 3,500 people. Moses could do something like that. I mean, he didn't need a judge for every 1,000, every 100, every 50, and every 10. Maybe he just needed a couple hundred more judges to help him out and bear the burden. But here's the thing. None of that is the point. The point is that Moses was alone and he delegated. I wonder if it took Moses some time to get used to delegation because he might have enjoyed being the only judge. It can kind of feel good when people come to you asking for your advice, your opinion, your help. It makes you feel like you are valuable. We love it when other people look to us as wise or intelligent. But even though if you were Moses, and you might for a while feel a sense of accomplishment and purpose, you're helping people all day long, Jethro is 100% right. Moses' workload was so heavy, it would get really old really fast. There would literally be no end to the job of being a judge. And what's more, God had not selected Moses to bring the people out into the desert and stay there and be a judge of all their concerns. Not to mention that with that many people and one single solitary judge, some people would be waiting days, weeks, who knows, months to even get an audience with Moses. And the movement, the mission of the people would grind to a halt, be a bitter halt. And that's not good for a people who have a problem with bitterness. Delegation solves the problem of the heavy workload, and it places Moses back in the position of leading the mission. He can lead while most of the other judges handle all the matters. What we read in this is that delegation fuels the mission. Now, I sometimes struggle with delegation. There are many times when I think, I can just do this. It's going to happen so much faster if I just do it. And I don't have to spend the time to explain how to do it. And what if the other person doesn't do it quite like I would do it? Getting others involved can be frustrating. Maybe you know that feeling. Delegation is sometimes difficult. But what Jethro reminds us in this story is that through our investment in other people's lives, delegation is not only missionally effective, delegation is discipleship. We're raising others up to support the work so that we're not alone and so that they are growing. I mean, consider what Paul the Apostle writes in Ephesians chapter 4, verses 11 through 13. So Jesus himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and teachers. He's talking about leaders. He gave them so that they could do all the work by themselves? No. What Paul says next is, he gave them to equip his people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. Leaders have a serious and important responsibility to delegate and raise people up. Now, there's a famous workplace phrase or slogan that says this: we ought to work ourselves out of a job. That might seem counterintuitive. Why would I want to give up my job? I need my job. But Moses and Jethro remind us that is sometimes true. Moses gave up one job, which was the job of being the judge of every single case, to take on another job, which was judging only the most important or stickiest cases, so that he could focus on the job of leading the mission of the people. That was his primary focus, leading them to the promised land. Now, my guess is that Moses' stature, when he delegated to the other judges, his stature actually probably increased in the eyes of the people. He was now clearly their top leader. It also helped Moses lead effectively by creating this whole structure of leadership that could serve far more people and raised far more leaders. So you don't need to work yourself out of a job in every situation, but we should make sure that we're investing in other people so that if we're out of the picture for whatever reason, our work, our ministry, our organization doesn't fall apart. It shouldn't all rest on us. Moses was already starting to raise people up, as we saw back in chapter 17. He pointed to Joshua to help him with the army. But Jethro gives Moses this vision that exponentially expands the idea of raising others up through delegation. So, who are you raising up? Who are you delegating to? Who are you mentoring? Maybe it's at work. Maybe it's in your church. Do you lead some kind of a group or a Bible study? Are you a teacher? What about in your family? How are you raising people up? Delegate to them. Get them involved. Purposefully, intentionally step aside and allow them to lead. Who do you have in your life so that you're not alone as a leader, but that you can bring them along with you, helping to raise them up?